Okay. Welcome to episode 30. Episode 30 of the ADHD
Holy
Adults.
shit.
I know. Shut up. You're not meant to talk yet. Fuck's sake. Know your place. Episode 30 of the ADHD Adults podcast. I'm still James Brown, co-founder of ADHD Adult UK. And I've realized that whenever I say that, before I introduce my colleague there, I never actually say that he's also co-founder of ADHD Adult UK. So it sounds like I found that it was someone else and you just do a podcast. So here he is, the best advert for contraception never pitched Durex, Dr. Alex Connor. Hi, Alex.
Well, hey there, neighbour.
Explain. I mean, what's that? What is that? What's that?
Yes. I think of you as my podcast neighbour. Me and Brian Cox think of you.
Again, for those not watching on YouTube, Alex has followed on from last week where he had a picture. Was it? I can't remember. Was it Philip Schofield?
Yeah, Phil.
Me. He's now put a picture of Brian Cox up to annoy me because I won't go into this. Not that he listens, but he's not my favourite presenter, and because I've done a bit of TV work, Alex likes winding me up and calling me a pound shop Brian Cox. And
that's exactly like what you are.
Yeah. So cheers, Al. Thanks for that, mate.
Mm-hmm.
It's your bit. Go on.
You have to ask how I am.
Oh, do I have to?
Yeah.
Oh, can we miss your bit if I don't do that?
I'm really well, thanks, James.
Fucking hell.
the unbelievably 30 episodes in, the numbers of people listening to this keeps going up like crazy. It makes no sense. James and I last week got recognised in central Birmingham at the fantastic Humanoid Recording Studios. If you want a good video studio, go to them. Are we allowed to do that, James? I'm in the pocket of big small business. But like the guy who owned the company or co-owned it was a fan of the podcast. I say fan, he'd heard the podcast.
Yeah. No, we haven't been as fans.
No. And we have had a letter though, James, from Robert from Kidderminster's written in.
Yeah, but you've not lost it. You've not lost kind of the thrust for this. You're still happy to do this bit. It's still very much on the agenda, is it, Al?
Anyway, I've sent a letter from Robert from Kidderminster. It just says, "You look tired, so very tired." I think that one's for me, Jay. We have had a real email from a listener I won't name because we haven't asked permission, and it says, "Hope you don't mind the unsolicited message. Can I thank you with all sincerity for your amazing podcast you do as a senior leader in place. I hit a wall last year and started to get assessed, which it's been a voyage of discovery ever since. The podcast has made me smile and laugh as much as it's like sitting in the pub with two mates, but more importantly, it's taught me there are at least two people out there with the same characteristics as me, and I don't suddenly feel the oddball in the world. It's making me laugh at the similarities, and we love that so much because that's why we wrote it. Really, it's why we started it, James, isn't it? Because we had nothing and we felt like losers, really.
Well, I knew you were losing. Can I again point out that your job title currently includes the word communication, and that's possibly the worst read out email that we've done on this podcast.
I got distracted. No one will notice. It'll be fine.
Well, no one listens to this bit, so actually it doesn't matter what you say. So, as usual, this lipstick-wearing pig of a podcast is a tragedy in 3 parts. We choose a theme. The last episode was the second part of a 2-parter where we talked about hyperactivity and impulsivity and how they're big issues for us and probably most of you. And this week we're going to talk about something that's a bit contentious. You know, because you've already seen the title of the podcast, I guess. But it's something that loads, and I mean loads of people have contacted us to ask about. And that is cannabis or marijuana and ADHD. We're not going to name, obviously, the people that have asked us about this because it's not currently legal and acceptable in many circles to wonder
Of those people, James, bear in mind you just teased me for not paying attention. This is the bit. This is the bit where I was going to talk about our amazing international numbers.
Oh, what happens to that?
You just walked straight over it with your ADHD-like character. Sometimes I think you've got ADHD.
You would. Well, go on then. Let's roll back to you. Let's have more Alex. Everybody wants that.
We have to because we've hit 99 blooming countries. We've got at least one listener in 99 blooming countries. Neither of us can figure out which two we've increased, because we had 97 last time we checked. But we know that Burundi is one of those 97. So I'm attempting to say thanks. So Murakoze Kane or Kane, thanks very much in Burundi. Go on, James.
I mean, that's mad, isn't it?
It's crazy, ridiculous.
I don't listen to this podcast or any other podcast. But again, I'm just astonished that anybody outside of, you know, my house and your house and close relatives listen to this utter dog shit of a podcast.
Dribble.
So getting back to my bit, which did interrupt your bit. So those three parts are him there, round-headed bellend doing psychoeducation. So our personal reflections, which are a bit difficult this week when you think about the subject, on what the theme of cannabis and ADHD means to us. And also the final bit, again, going to be hard to do top tips on cannabis and ADHD, but we'll give it a bash. Tips that we understand, it says, or have tried, or that work for us. Let's see. I'm going to have to really think about language for the rest of this podcast. So I'll hand you over to the psychoeducation monkey, who understands cannabis culture about as well as he does music that isn't played on an orchestra on a stage, to earn his corn. Fire away, Al.
Okay, right. I can do the psychoeducation bit. People often use the words cannabis and marijuana as the same thing, but they're not really interchangeable. They don't mean exactly the same thing. It says here. Cannabis, the term cannabis refers to any product and all products that are derived from the plant Cannabis sativa. That's obviously, James, that's Latin sativa, and it would be unfamiliar to you because the word sativa means cultivated.
I mean, it's not unfamiliar because obviously you've got indica as well, and depending on, I'll let you carry on.
Marijuana or Mary Jane, is that right, James? Like in a doobie? Is it doobie, James? Have I said it?
Fuck me.
Am I cool now? So
I don't think you've ever been cool or ever will be cool. I don't know what cool is, but it's not you.
Can I carry on with my spliff culture references, please?
You can, yes.
So marijuana, Mary Jane, refers to I had to look that up. Refers to parts of or products that come from the plant Cannabis sativa that contain the psychoactive substance THC. If you're interested, that's tetrahydrocannabinol. Tetra meaning 4, hydro meaning got a watery bit, and cannabinol is the name of the compound. THC. So what ties cannabis sativa and marijuana together are the chemicals they contain, known as cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are a group of substances, in this case found in the cannabis plant. And some of them are psychoactive. They get you stoned or they affect your brain. And some of them are not psychoactive. The two main cannabinoids in plants are THC and cannabidiol, which is known as CBD. These are very, very famous things. We're going to try and cover both a little bit. Now, huge klaxon here, James.
Klaxon. Fucking hell.
We have to be very clear, James and I, that we are not telling people to take drugs or in any way promoting them.
Oh.
But let's start with recreational use of cannabis.
I wish.
In the general population, around 30% of people in England and Wales, aged between 16 and 59, say that they have used marijuana at least once in their lifetime. That's up by almost 50% in less than 20 years. That's not clear if it's 50% who have or that's prepared to say they have. In adults with ADHD, the use of marijuana is higher than in non-ADHD people. Studies have shown that ADHD adults are more than twice as likely to meet the criteria for cannabis use disorder than adults who do not have ADHD. Almost 50% of people with cannabis use disorder seem to have ADHD. So researchers suggest that people with ADHD may be using marijuana to self-medicate for many of the symptoms and the medication side effects, and that more frequent use may mitigate ADHD-related executive dysfunction, but it is really slim research, hence we're not promoting it.
It is. We'll touch on that you and I have talked about this a lot, that how that it's really difficult to do good research with illicit substances because it's so controlled. But you've covered the fun elements, if you like, the recreational use. What about therapeutically? Because lots of people get in touch who are medication hesitant, but say, I've heard or I've read, about using cannabis or marijuana for my symptoms. Lots of people get in touch, saying, "Will weed help?" So, what about therapeutically?
Like proper medical therapeutic help. Well, you've said it exactly right. Yeah, doing research on illegal substances is notoriously difficult. As James likes, one of my previous papers as a scientist was on ecstasy use in clubs of Swansea, and that was an absolute ethical minefield.
Best
it's really
paper
difficult.
Ever.
It is good. It's on the internet if you want to read it. So there are lots of regulatory loopholes. But the research that there is, it does suggest that people with ADHD may be using marijuana to self-medicate for many of the symptoms, but also the side effects are the same. So,
hang on, you're repeating something we've already said here.
I am, yeah. I think I've doubled it up. But you're right. Oh, that is a real lack of attention.
That's a terrible lack of attention. And I don't know if it's your fault or mine. I'm going to blame you, though.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Go with that and move on.
Well, what I meant to say afterwards is that research is tiny. There was a really small study in Finland that showed that medical marijuana and any products that contain mostly THC, which is that psychoactive cannabinoid we talked about, were found to be helpful in alleviating ADHD symptoms in people that were diagnosed with ADHD. And in particular, those symptoms were poor tolerance to frustration, outbursts of anger, boredom. This is essentially you listening to my psychoeducation bit, and problems related to concentration. Got to say, this is a tiny study.
Yeah.
Studies of self-reported symptoms from people with ADHD. A 2016 study of 268 separate online discussion threads reported that a quarter of people on these believed that marijuana had a positive role to play in their ADHD symptom management. That is not hard facts, but lots and lots of anecdotes sometimes can be used as indicative for further study. That's as much as we can go with that, really. A study in 2017 tested a cannabinoid medication on adults with ADHD. Again, small study, and the findings weren't statistically significant. The small change they did see was small improvements in ADHD symptoms. They need a bigger study. It's possible the findings would have been more definitive or just gone back to nothing at all. We need more research.
So I suppose what we're saying is, because we like to try and be evidence-based, there isn't a strong or even a moderate evidence base for the use of marijuana.
Yeah, because of the lack of studies rather than
exactly. Yeah. So it's an absence of evidence, not evidence of an absence.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I'm sure with bigger studies we might find something out. So that's kind of marijuana. What about the massive fucking bullshitty bandwagon that is CBD oil, which, depending on who you listen to, cures everything from chronic pain to having a round head?
Yeah, I take CBD oil every day and it's not working, James. Like a lollipop. CBD oil, not my favorite topic. Evidence is weak. There is a little bit. There was a systematic review of all the studies done recently, and that suggested there was some moderate evidence CBD could improve the symptoms of ADHD. So there, naysayers. It's weak though, and there is also some evidence that CBD oil can help with conditions that ADHD often coexists with. The obvious one is anxiety.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. That's also the longest I've heard somebody who's clearly not a stoner or ever really smoked weed. I don't know lots of people that smoke weed, obviously, he says. Backtracking. No. That's the longest I've ever heard somebody who isn't a stoner talk about weed. So it's probably time for a break. We will be right back with part 2, which is going to be a very awkward, I think, personal reflections section. See you in a bit.
What's weed? Right. Welcome back to podcast 30 of the ADHD Adults podcast.
Podcast 30.
Podcast 30, that's correct. I nearly said, "Hey, dudes," because we are talking about something I know an incredible lot about, which is your cannabis and the use of it in ADHD. We are navigating the minefield that is personal reflections of cannabis use in ADHD. I'm going to have to go for you, James. You're going to have to go first. What's
Thanks,
it? Yeah, go for it.
Hospital pass there straight away. Cheers.
You're welcome.
Right. How do I do this? There is terminology you can use. So I'm going to go with a friend of mine.
Yeah.
A friend of mine has used marijuana kind of on and off throughout their life since they were 14. And this friend tells me it's probable that they did use it to self-medicate for some of the issues associated with ADHD before they knew they had it. This friend has certainly continued to use marijuana after their diagnosis, probably at an increased frequency, I'd say, if you ask them, because I'm not telling you if it's a male or a female. What this friend can definitely tell you personally is that marijuana doesn't have any impact, positive or negative, on their ADHD symptoms, but it does help my domestic anxiety.
James, you might have slipped up there.
What did I say?
With my domestic anxiety. Yeah, with his.
Sorry, with their.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, sorry. My friend has said that marijuana definitely helps with their domestic anxiety.
Right.
But what my friend would also like to say is that sometimes using marijuana, I don't know how much they use or how they use it, for example, can just, if you like, delay the anxiety, push it back to the next day, and you can end up having a worse day. So really, it's putting it in the post. It's just knocking it back a bit. So if you've got domestic anxiety in the evening, my friend says, and you get stoned, sometimes the next day you can end up being more anxious, or having, the way in which they would put it would be having a lowered threshold for anxiety. But that's just them, and not me, obviously, in any way.
Absolutely flawless professionalism, James. Well done.
I think that went well, really, didn't it? That went better than it probably could have. What I can also say about me this time is that I have tried CBD oil, and you may have picked up in part one that there was just a faint, very subtle edge of cynicism in my approach towards it. I tried CBD oil for a number of different things that it doesn't fucking work for. And what I found is that it doesn't work for anything. Now, lots of people honestly swear by CBD oil, and that's fine. And there is evidence that it can help some things. And at the end of the day, our brains have receptors for cannabinoids. We have endogenous cannabinoids known as endocannabinoids. We make our own molecules that look a bit like cannabis. So clearly there is a role within our central nervous system for these molecules. But CBD oil has never done anything for me, ADHD or otherwise. So for me, it's a big fat fuck off. But I don't know about you. So what about you? I mean, big toker, are you sucking on a blunt before we started? Tell us about your personal reflections.
I don't know what that means, but it doesn't sound like me. I don't know if I'm definitely high, but it sounds like there's a dog in the background. Is that in your house?
It's not in my house because I haven't got a dog, Alex.
Well, that's what I thought.
It's outside my house.
There's a dog outside. Good. Yeah. Yes, no, I was, and I'm very much a toker. Big old joint. No, James, I'm not. I hate it. Hate it so much. It's the worst. Whenever I've smoked it in the past, which I haven't, or something, I don't know how. It just felt dreadful. It was like a horrendous lack of a loss of self and a series of like fake epiphanies, and I just wanted it to stop. I sat in the toilet wishing it would stop. It isn't for me, essentially. So I didn't have that. In a way, James, I'm cool because I can't tolerate drinks. Right? That's cool. It's cool, isn't it? Say no. That makes me, in a way, a very real sense.
If you're Nancy Reagan or Mr. T, then yes, it is cool to say no. But of course, no. Obviously, we are not advocating for the use of any illicit.
I'm definitely not horrible.
And just abstain. And I agree. I know somebody looks just like you. I've seen under the influence of marijuana when it's baked into a lovely muffin. And they didn't enjoy it, Alex. In fact,
No.
they almost ruined everybody else's night by...
Pretty much the one and only time that friend of yours...
Yes.
Yeah, awful. Who, the next day, when everybody else was doing it again, James, do you remember, went for a coffee with your father-in-law?
Yeah, in Amsterdam for my statue.
We went looking at the architecture.
And the museums and the architecture.
Oversharing was in the last episode, right?
Great use of it. Great use of a stag do that was.
Can I add, James, as well, that those natural cannabinoids in our brains trigger the cannabinoid receptors. Obviously, that's what we call them, but we haven't evolved to respond to cannabis. We've evolved to respond to cannabinoids. And a big part of what they do is make us feel hungry, which is where the munchies come from, because you're triggering the munchie response of humans. Yeah, that's the only personal thing I know.
The last thing I'll add as a personal reflection about my friend who isn't me is that one of the reasons my friend who isn't me uses cannabis. My friend who isn't me also, like me, happens to be a binge eater and have binge eating disorder. And my friend who isn't me often actually uses marijuana as an excuse to binge eat, because it takes away the emotional guilt of doing it, because you blame the marijuana. You've got the munchies and therefore it's okay to eat all the shit in the house. Right. So my friend who isn't me often doesn't just use it for domestic anxiety. They also use it as an excuse to just eat all the shit without having the guilt. So that's a really negative thing. But it's a way of getting past that desire to do it, but removing the guilt, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's an emotional truth, isn't it? Negative or positive. That's what we're about.
It's a fucking minefield, this, isn't it? Right. Yep. So we have got time. We have got time. No, you're right, actually. It's not for you. We've now got time for Alex's favourite game, after obviously Magic the Gathering or something really ridiculous like that, which is what's James lost, mislaid, or forgotten this week. So
is it your spliffs?
Yeah, I was stoned when is he spliffs? Jesus. So I'm going for this is a we. I'm including Mrs. ADHD in this because obviously I spend a lot of time with her, unfortunately for her, and we often collectively lose stuff. So between us, we don't know who it is that lost it, and we then have big arguments because obviously it wasn't me, and then it normally isn't. And she'll say, "Well, it wasn't me," when it normally is. And we've learned to deal with this a bit better than we used to. Because it used to cause fucking all-out rows. So, which of these three things did we, Sam, lose this week? Was it number one, a set of AirPods? I'm not saying if it's mine or Mrs. ADHD's.
Yeah.
Was it number two, a laptop, or was it number three, a light switch?
Right. That's difficult. I don't think it's AirPods, because you can't lose them because your ears are so big you have to use blue tack to keep them in there.
So again, the strategy is insult leads to incorrect answer.
Yeah. I don't think it's a laptop because why don't I think it's a laptop? Actually, because I saw your laptop last week and it wasn't lost. So I want it to be light switch, because you can't lose the light switch. You'd have to be, technically speaking, a fucking idiot. So I'm going to say light switch in the desperate hope I'm right.
Technically speaking, we're a couple of fucking idiots because we did lose a light switch. One of the many impulse buys that Mrs. ADHD made is the lights. I can't remember what they're called, which are LEDs that change color, and they attach to a hub so you can control it on your phone. And they come with a remote control light switch. So you cover the light switch on the wall with this plastic bracket, and you take out this little magnetically held in light switch, so you can kind of sit on the sofa and change and it just went. And now there's actually two in this room. One is for a lamp in the corner, and one is for the main light. And both of the brackets for them were empty. And I came down in the morning, where's the light switch? Obviously, Mrs. ADHD. She said, well, I don't know. And then she went, oh, no, actually, I did drop it earlier, but I put it back in the bracket, and both of these brackets were empty. And I said, well, don't worry, we'll leave it. And then I'm not joking, 2 days later, it appeared in the bottom bracket, which is not the one it normally goes in. So she clearly fucking put it back there, but denies having done that. So we managed for 2 days to lose a light switch. You've got 11 points, I think.
11 out of 21. That is slightly over 50%, James. And you know what that means? That's minimum competency for a healthcare professional.
I'd like to think you are minimally competent, just in general.
Me too.
It's a good way. You know what? That's a bar you can just about reach. Okay, so on that note, we'll take a break now, and we'll come back with, again, I don't know how we're going to do this, Al. Top tips on cannabis.
Yeah.
See you in a bit.
That's brilliant. Oh man. Right. Welcome back to podcast number 30 of the ADHD Adults. We're talking about cannabis use and ADHD. Before the break, we were sort of talking about personal reflections on cannabis use
of our friends.
Yeah, of James's friend.
Yes.
Old school James. And now a very short section, which is top tips. What are we doing? Are we doing tips for rolling spliffs? I don't know what that is. The only tip I've got is that tobacco. Take that out of the equation if you can. It's really, really, really dangerous. Horrible stuff. Burning anything and breathing into your lungs is ill-advised. God, I'm a geek. I'm boring myself. James, can you do top tips? I've got nothing.
Yeah. All the clever kids vape now anyway, so
don't know what that means.
So again, it's difficult, isn't it? Top tips. One of the things that we don't do is condemn, kind of all condone. As an organization, we understand that to some extent with ADHD, sometimes it's just whatever gets you through the day. It really is. And for some people that they need alcohol, for some people they need gambling, other substances. All these things are destructive. They're all negative, but sometimes you just do need something to get you through the day, because sometimes life can be shit with ADHD. Not all the time, but sometimes it's tough. So we don't certainly condemn or condone in this case. What I would give as a tip is more based around the CBD oil side of things than the smoking weed or vaping weed side of things. And that is that if you do try CBD oil, even though I'm obviously skeptical, for lots of people, and there is evidence that it does have benefits, lots of people like it, all CBD oils are not equal. So don't go and buy the kind of cheap supermarket or brand chemist, £1.50 CBD oil capsules, because they're probably going to be shit, to be honest. They're cheap for a reason, that they've been produced cheaply. The way in which the oil has been extracted is not going to be as good. The content of cannabidiol in there is going to be lower, and therefore do a little bit of research. There are websites that will recommend CBD oil from specific brands of the plant and that come at specific strengths. And therefore, if you want to try CBD oil for sleep or for your ADHD symptoms or chronic pain or for anything, it's probably worth investing just a little bit more than getting it from I was about to say the corner shop, but you don't get it at the corner shop, from a chemist, or a supermarket, because that stuff's just going to be shit, isn't it? Get a high quality oil and give it a bash.
No, don't give it a bash.
CBD oil, not fucking Jesus. Were you listening?
No, I meant because it's the evidence is weak. Purely research based.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Product recommendation of the week. It's difficult to have one that's relevant to the subject. So we're going to go with robot vacuum, because somebody messaged me this week to say that theirs was brilliant. Set it off, watch it run, cleans the floor for you. The only caveat is if you've got a cat that shits in the house, it's going to make a massive mess off your carpet. So if you've got a cat-free home, or if you've got very polite cats that tend to shit outside, then robot vacuum all the way. Right. That was episode 30 episodes. Oh, I honestly thought when this started that if we managed 4 and had 10 listeners, then we'd have done well. So
me too.
Yeah, so a big pat on the back to me, really, for doing all the work. And
well done, you.
Anyway, that was episode 30 of the ADHD Adults. As usual, please contact us via the socials, because as we've said in the last episode, we've lost the WhatsApp phone still. Can't find it. I've even cleared the whole office out now and I have no idea where it is. And we still don't know the email addresses. So get in touch with us on the socials if you've got anything you'd like to share, if you've got any subjects for upcoming podcasts that you'd like to suggest, or if you'd just like to give me something to throw at Alex that's abusive or horrible about his perfectly spherical face. Until next time, take care.
Peace out.